Hi, and welcome to our special NFL Draft Recap show on the Red Zone Warriors Fantasy Football Show. I am Rob Shiva Winner Smith, along with our resident rookie draft expert, Jim the Jimmer Kiernan, and last but certainly not least, our resident Lions fan, Jay. Just leave Josh Gordon alone already. Corsel, how are we today, gents?
Feeling like Josh Gordon.
Sicker than a dog.
Fantastic, fantastic. Remember, please tweet us your fantasy football questions at Red Zone Warriors. So we are going to go into our next segment here where we cover the latest news and notes around the NFL.
All right, first up, Sean Green. He has a surprise knee surgery. The same knee that caused him to miss 5 games last year. Orthoscopic procedure last September. Going to miss up to everything in training camp. That sucks. Sean Green, well, he wasn't relevant anyway, so who cares?
Go Bishop Sankey. All right, the Browns, big news here. They already cut Vince Young. Yes, already. I think they signed him for, what, 6 business days? Not sure if it's pity money. Moving along.
All right, the Vikings would like to part ways with running back Adrian Peterson, quote, rather sooner than later. Reports Bleacher Report to Mike Freeman. Peterson just turned 29, and he's due to make a salary of $11.75 million and $12.75 million, respectively, over the next 2 years. The AFC general manager told Freeman he expects this season to be Peterson's last with Minnesota. So where will Adrian go, or will he retire? We do not know.
He will definitely not retire because he's my keeper. All right. The Browns receiver, we kind of touched on this a little bit. Josh Gordon just can't keep it out of his lungs. I don't know what the deal is. He's likely banned between anywhere from 8 to 16 games, assuming the ESPN's report of a positive drug test is true, reports Sports Illustrated Peter King. So remember, in 2013, he has the receiving yards leader. He's already been disciplined twice for testing positive. This does not look good. I actually had him as a keeper this year in the 10th round, which was fantastic, and I cried myself to sleep yesterday. Thank you.
George Clooney, actually no, Clowney, drafted by the Texans. With him and J.J. Watt together, reports are that Andrew Luck's sphincter shrunk 3 sizes when he heard the news he had to play the Texans twice a year. Now, the most important news of the day. Jimmer?
Let's talk about Michael Sam. I even brought my little Missouri Tiger with me today. First openly gay man to be drafted, was picked in the 7th round by St. Louis Rams. Historical. This is awesome. Great news. He fell way further than a lot of people thought, but hey, he was drafted. I'm sure our little league commissioner, Goodell, probably was getting a little nervous after he said, oh, yeah, we're openly going to support the gay people if they want to come play football. And then he didn't get drafted until, wait for it. We got 5 drafts left. Now we'll pick him. So, guys, thoughts? I think it's awesome.
I totally agree. I think it's fantastic. Hopefully in the coming years we will not even have to mention it because we will simply look at this guy as a football player and what he can do on the field. But it is a historic moment, and we need to mention it for sure, but I am 100% behind him. However, his jersey, guys, is the number 2 jersey sold in the NFL from the rookies. It is fantastic, so hopefully he actually makes the team. And we can get away from this topic, so you just be a football player.
And my only question about that jersey sales, is it because people are supporting Michael Sam, or is it because they think that the jersey might be worth something because he was the first gay athlete in the NFL?
Oh, who cares?
Oh, yeah. Well, one other note, just to clarify, read some reports, did some little due diligence here. Why did he fall to the 7th round? Why was he such a late-round pick? Quite frankly, he's a phenomenal athlete, SEC Defensive Player of the Year, All-American honors, I believe, if not first team. Guy is incredible. However, the scouting reports on him said that, hey, he's a one-move guy, and 90% of his sacks this year came on one move. He comes around the outside, around the tackles, and he's phenomenal at it. It's a very good move. He's a little weak against the rush, and so that's kind of, I think, what was a little skepticism there and why he kind of fell so far. The other unfortunate part is with the St. Louis Rams, they already got Quinn there. They already got the other guy, Chris Long, at the defensive end positions, and then they just drafted that Donald kid. So, I mean, you kind of got to wonder how many reps he's going to get. Doesn't matter. Keep him in the league. Let him learn. He'll be a tradable asset, hopefully, here in the future to come, and hopefully he'll play for a very long time. So,
absolutely. All right, so that is it for the news and notes. We are going, like we said, this is our NFL draft recap special, so we're going to be touching on the big names from the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks that was just drafted over this past weekend. Talk about their 2014 fantasy relevancy for some of them, and for a lot of them, it's simply how they possibly affect the guys currently on the teams that they were drafted, if it downgrades their productivity potentially for this year. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it with the running backs, and the first running back off the board in the second round at pick 22 was one Bishop Sankey going to the Tennessee Titans. So Jim, as our resident college/rookie NFL expert, you watch tons and tons and tons more college football than Jay and I combined. What are your thoughts on Bishop? Number one is from his collegiate career, his thoughts on him going to the Tennessee Titans, which was the best landing spot for a rookie going into this draft, moving forward for 2014.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I try to catch about 6 or 7 Oregon Duck games a year, so I love college football religiously. Got to actually see Bishop Sankey play, I think, 3 times now. Twice I've seen him play, at least the last 2 years. Anyways, what this kid brings to the table, he's a workhorse. This guy is rather big. In my opinion, he was one of the big 3 running backs that would be an immediate impact depending on what team they went to. It's a very thin class of running backs this year. There's none that are like just absolutely elite. They're going to be game changers, nothing like we've seen in the past couple of drafts, quite frankly. So what Bishop Sankey brings to the table for the Tennessee Titans is he's a 3-down back. Guy can move. He's got quick feet. Definitely something where we got to follow this whole Sean Green issue, because if Sean Green, quite frankly, he can't play, or he does, or he gets injured, Bishop Sankey's going to get a lot of carries. He's worth taking kind of a mid to late round draft pick on a flyer on, because he's worth the risk. I mean, he could be the only running back, quite frankly, for the Tennessee Titans, especially after they got rid of Chris Johnson. So he could be the guy of the future. Now, keep in mind, he is getting paired with Jake Locker, his old teammate back at University of Dubs, Washington. So that's just something to keep an eye on, especially going into training camp and into preseason games. He might even outright beat it and take it from Sean Green, quite frankly, because Sean Green hasn't done anything but, beat out Trent Richardson for most yards per carry.
Yeah, that's what I see happening. I don't see Sean Green being relevant with Sankey over there in Tennessee. I think that he's definitely going to end up with the starting job there. Maybe not right away, but he'll work his way into it pretty fast.
Yeah, and I've been looking kind of at the numbers of where the so-called experts have him actually predicted to go in the redraft leagues, and and they're putting him in somewhere in the top 20, the low top 25, so anywhere from kind of 22 to 31 range for running backs off the board. So and I think because it's not necessarily, and again, I don't watch a lot of college football, but it's not necessarily because of him and his talent per se as much as it is about where he landed at Tennessee. Yeah, and yes, Sean Green is not Adrian Peterson, LaDainian Tomlinson, and so forth, coming off this second knee surgery in the offseason. So it's just really sketchy. So I think if drafting him in that range, kind of taking a flyer on him, it's probably the best flyer you can take this season for a rookie running back. So we're going to move on to Jeremy Hill, running back drafted out of LSU to the Cincinnati Bengals. if you're not following us at home on YouTube, Jim is stroking the tiger, as they say, as we speak. So
this is my Tony the Tiger.
He was drafted directly after Bishop in the second round with the 23rd pick to Cincinnati. Jim, what do you think about his fit there in Cincinnati? Obviously, they have Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, a.k.a. the law firm there, kind of old, long in the tooth, and they've got the sensational rookie of last year going into his second year, Giovanni Bernard. So what do you think Jeremy Hill can do in this backfield moving forward?
First of all, Jeremy Hill, dude's kind of a beast. He runs bigger than he is. He's a north-south runner, extremely talented. You probably saw some of his highlight reels in some of the LSU games this year. Dude just kind of blew through some guys and definitely created space just because he was so fast. He's not particularly quick to learn offenses, I think is the best way to put it. So I would kind of keep the law firm on retention here early season, and then as the season prevails, I think Jeremy Hill will eventually take over that second role. I don't think this is going to hurt Gio's touches. I don't think this is going to be a drastic change. You might want to watch for the goal line touches, as few as there was this last year for either one of them, Bernard or the law firm. But I think this is something where Jeremy Hill could easily run into that, easily take over short distance carries down the road. So that's kind of my pick on that. I don't think he's really worth a late round gamble because I think you could probably get him off the waivers in most 10-man leagues. 12-man leagues, you're probably going to need to draft him late to get him. So that's just kind of my take on that. Jake?
Yeah, I think if he does take over for the law firm, the guy's going to get goal line carries galore. That's not Gio's for the day. But I agree with you. I don't think he dents Gio's value very much. That guy's talented as hell and is going to be a bell cow back there this year, I think. But yeah, Green Ellis never really impressed me all that much, so I'm pretty excited to see what Hill's got to do.
Yeah, I mean, clearly this running back class is not going to probably be as deep as it ended up being last year. We had a good, 5 rookies who made a absolute fantasy impact, RB1, RB2 types. But, if you want to take a flyer on this guy, and like Jimmer said, in late rounds or maybe just pick him up on waivers. But, I don't think Giovanni gets hurt at all. But I think, as the season progresses, he could take a considerable amount of attempts, away from Ben Jarvis as the season goes on, and kind of, probably will end up being kind of the handcuff to Giovanni when all things are said and done. So, anything to finish up on that, Jim?
Well, yeah, I just want to talk about 3 more guys real quick, and let's just talk about that are just kind of undraftable real quick, just based on the situation, that we can kind of collaborate on each one of these guys. Carlos Hyde, who went to San Francisco, second-round pick. Charles Sims went to the Bucks, third-round pick. And then Trey Mason, who I really like, he came out of Auburn Tigers, third round. Each 3 of these guys are in a situation where there's just so many running backs already in the backfields. Carlos Hyde, who I think is a tremendous talent, had he gone somewhere else, he would have been a starter. Unfortunately, he's the 5th running back now in that bejumbled backfield behind Frank Gore, Kendall Hunter, LaMichael James, and Marcus Lattimore, the great late Marcus Lattimore. I mean, come on. He's just not going to play. So they're not draftable. Charles Sims, same deal. You just got too many guys there. Doug Martin, Bobby Rainey, and Mike James over there. And same thing for Trey Mason. Obviously Zach Stacy's going to be the work bell cow, if you will, this year. Isaiah Pede and Darrell Richardson are there well. So just to kind of cover those 3 guys real quick, I think they're great guys, great athletes. They're just kind of in the wrong situation, and hopefully that gives them time to develop, and maybe they're worth drafting in later years, especially Carlos Hyde, in my opinion. And you know what? While we're at it, let's throw in Terrence West while we're there for the Cleveland Browns. He's just going to be that third back between an already terrible backfield. Ben Tate's going to be carrying way too many over there. So, guys, any thoughts on those 4 guys?
Yeah, I'll pipe in here. I think for Carlos Hyde, the 49ers, I mean, to me, when I saw that he was drafted there, that draft pick to me screams that Lattimore may not be quite fully ready like they thought. I don't know that that's true. He had I mean, he rehabbed all of last season with a professional NFL staff. I was hoping he would be ready this year. I'm not saying that he's not, but I think they might still be concerned there. I think at the end of the day, I'm just staying away from this backfield. I don't like Frank Gore this year. If you listen to our last podcast, I think this is the year he falls off. Now that they have 27 running backs behind him, I just probably want to stay away from this whole scenario. I don't have much to say on Sims. Trey Mason, I see, they drafted him. I think they learned a lesson from last year. I mean, they went into the beginning of the season with all these, mediocre backs at best. They went back and forth. They didn't know who their starter was. Nobody was performing well. And, week whatever it was, 3 or 4, Zach Stacy popped, and, he ended up being their guy. But I don't think, because of what they saw at the beginning of last season, they don't have much trust in Cunningham, Dale Richardson, Isaiah Pete. So I think that's why they drafted Trey Mason. I think Trey Mason probably, as long as he can learn the playbook and so forth, probably becomes, the backup to Zach Stacy almost right out of the gate. We'll just kind of see how that pans out through the offseason and through preseason. It's tough to say, but again, not a guy that you would necessarily draft, maybe in deeper leagues as a backup to Stacy as a flyer, but maybe one of those guys that you end up, dropping in the first 3 weeks. And then, Terrence West, to me, there's nobody behind Ben Tate. Ben Tate, he plays through injuries and stuff, but he does get hurt quite a bit. I think this downgrades Ben Tate a little bit in my book. I might drop him, 3, 4, 5 spots on my board because of this. I think Terrence West is probably the best back behind Ben Tate already there with, Chris Obanaya and these guys you never heard on, Dion Lewis and so forth. So he's probably the most talented guy there outside of Ben Tate. And I just don't trust Ben Tate there. I think Ben Tate was a Band-Aid for this backfield. I don't think Ben Tate was brought over there and through free agency to be, their long-term guy. I think he's a short-term solution. So I think, West could end up being the handcuff to Ben Tate and might very well see more playing time than we realize if Ben Tate struggles or goes down early. Jay, do you have any thoughts on any of these guys?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on West. I think he's going to give Ben Tate a run for his money. And if this kid shows any pass-catching ability, he may just pass old Ben in playing time by season. And like you said, Tate, he does get injured. Not the most healthy back in the world, so I think this guy could definitely be worth a handcuff, or just keep a real close eye on the waiver wires for him. Keep an eye on Ben Tate when he goes down.
Yeah. So Jay or Jimmer, any words on Kadeem Carey before we close out kind of the running backs? I know he's going to Chicago, and obviously there's a top 4 overall running back there with Matt Forte. This guy was drafted in the 4th round, kind of towards the latter part of the 4th round. I mean, unless Forte goes down, and if he does, do you think he has any value possibly off the waiver wire?
Yeah, honestly, he's not draftable just because Forte has been kind of a rock of consistency this past year, and quite frankly, Kadeem Carey, he basically led. Now, keep in mind, FBS, that's Division I football. He led it in overall yards, and he wasn't just a product of a system necessarily at Arizona. I got to watch him play firsthand. He beat up a lot of teams. This guy is very big, very physical, very strong. He's not necessarily shifty, but when he hits a hole, he's gone. Goodbye. I mean, he's not the fastest guy, he's not the quickest guy, but he does all the right moves because he's a football player. He gets that. And that's the one difference between him and Terrence West. West played FCS football at Townsend. He didn't play anywhere. So that's why I was never overall particularly thrilled with Terrence West. So that's the difference between the two of those. You got a big league guy that basically already has yards on him. I think of him as an upgraded Monty Ball, in my opinion, is what got Kadeem Carey. So he's game time ready right now. So with that, that's the end of my thoughts on running backs.
All right. We will transition over to the wide receiver rookie class. And folks who aren't been paying attention the last several months, this is probably one of the deepest wide receiver classes that we've seen come through the draft in several years. I mean, the wide receivers in fantasy football, standard PPR regardless, is super deep, and now we're adding multiple guys into this mix. So I think in general that brings all these guys down a little bit, just simply because the veteran guys and the guys that we know produce is so deep. But that being said, we saw it from Keenan Allen last year. We saw it from Tavon Austin towards the latter part of the season. You know, guys can have an impact going into their rookie season. So to launch this off, you know, the first wide receiver off the board, nobody thought it would be anybody but Sammy Watkins. He came out the first round, pick 4. After the Browns traded down with the Buffalo Bills, they came up and grabbed him. They wanted this guy. They obviously need him in Buffalo. So, Jim, from your vast viewing of college football, what do you see from Sammy Watkins out of Clemson with your Clemson Tiger there on your lap?
Yep, he's now the Clemson Tiger. Sammy Watkins, first of all, he's the wrong size. He's not that, he's missing a bunch of things that you just kind of expect out of a big wide receiver, especially out of wide receiver 1. What Sammy Watkins, though, has is speed. I mean, my God, this guy, when his acceleration, he hits like 0 to 20 on like his first step. It doesn't even make sense. When you see him, he catches the ball. He's kind of fearless. He'll cut across the middle, and as soon as he gets it, I mean, he's got one move and he's gone. Like, he sees daylight. We've seen him constantly break through there. So as far as he's the only guy that I really see as a true wide receiver 1 potential as a rookie, and I hate saying that. He's a low-end wide receiver 1, but I mean, if the guy doesn't hit 1,000 yards receiving, it's kind of like a bust almost for him. That's how much expectations are there, and quite frankly, deservedly. He's a hell of an athlete. I would prefer to draft him as a wide receiver 2. So, take that where you will. It depends on your league, PPR, non-PPR. This kid's going to be a superstar, though, and I think that's what we really need to focus on. So with that, guys, I'll turn it over to you. I know you guys are not as high as I am on it, but dude's a true talent. You can't mess with that.
Yeah, look, I think I was a little higher on Sammy Watkins before Buffalo went and traded Stevie Johnson. I think he's going to struggle. He's now the only decent wide receiver in Buffalo. He's going to see a shit ton of double teams, triple teams. So, if I took him, it would be very late in a keeper league, but I doubt I'll take him at all.
Yeah, I was higher on him before he went to the Bills. I mean, that's my big thing. I mean, the guy, I was hoping Cleveland would take him, and they clearly needed to because, Josh Gordon, I just saw him smoking a blunt walking down my sidewalk there. But they didn't. It was kind of weird. But so anyway, the Bills, they gave up a lot for him. They went up the draft to get him. They gave up a 2015 first-round pick for him. He's going to start. He's going to get a ton of volume. The problem is he's getting that volume from one E.J. Emanuel, and that's what concerns me. His targets will be high, but they're not going to be good targets. I think if they give him enough targets, obviously, if you give enough volume, you can be relevant. But I really was hoping he would go somewhere else from a fantasy perspective. And I think, Stevie Johnson leaving there, I think that probably hurts him. They have basically nobody else, so Sammy's going to see the number 1 corner every time they play. I think it's going to hurt him. So he's one of the more talented guys for sure, but because of the landing place that he finds himself, that knocked him down a little bit in my book. But he'll definitely be drafted in redraft leagues, and he's definitely the top dynasty wide receiver off the board for years to come.
He's never played in the cold.
Never played in the cold. Well, welcome to Buffalo.
Burr.
All right, so we're going to move along to one Mr. Mike Evans, wide receiver from A&M. This is who Mr. Johnny Football threw all his touchdowns to and just heave it up in the air, and this guy would come down with it. He went in the first round, pick 7 to Tampa Bay. Jimmer, I'm sure you saw a lot of Mike Evans. What do you think about his ability, first of all, his role at Tampa Bay with one Mr. Vincent Jackson, and possibly, his dynasty value moving forward in coming years?
He's a big dude. Let's say that for starters. A lot of catches he made, a lot of big plays he made was basically Manziel scrambling and needed to find a target. If you're missing a 6'5" target, you got other problems. We'll get to Manziel later. But my point is that this kid, he knows how to get open. He's got some football skills in that sense. Honestly, I really don't know how he'll translate. I think he was so hyped up in his own mind and being in the Manziel world, the Manziel sideshow, if you will. I'll get into my comments about that later. But he's in a unique situation that I mean, yeah, he's a opposite Vincent Jackson. I don't know what that'll really do for him. Quite frankly, I want to take a wait-and-see approach on him. I think at best he's a wide receiver 3. I mean, you might start him as a flex in some weeks, but I really don't think anyone should necessarily draft him. That's my opinion. I think he's a kind of wait-and-see because, again, that preseason camps and training camps, who knows? The guy might not even he might not have a relationship with Mike Glennon, another fellow redhead, you know? So I'll just leave it at that. So that's my take on him. I'm not very high on Mike Evans.
Yeah, there's a reason Jimmer's the draft expert and the rookie expert because I don't watch much college football, but I did take a little bit of time over the past few weeks to watch some Mike Evans highlights because there was rumor that he was possibly getting drafted by my Lions. So from what I saw, he's somewhat impressive. The one thing that really stood out to me is that the guy can catch. I mean, he does not drop balls very often. Good hands. So if that translated over to the NFL for him, I think he'll end up all right. Maybe not this year, but down the line for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see him as draftable. I think if he pops, you might get him off waivers for a week or two, but I think that you're going to see little streaky things from him and probably not worth being drafted. I mean, Josh McCown went over to Tampa Bay. For those of you who don't recall that, which he did pretty well in Chicago when he had his opportunity there. But, I think with Vincent Jackson there, I think that's good for Evans. I think it takes some pressure off him. He's not going to be seeing the top corner. He's not going to be getting double teamed. That'll open some things up for him. But I think at the end of the day, you're looking at a guy that might get, 45, 50 catches, something like that. So it's nobody that's super relevant to me, in a 10, 12-man league. So we're going to move along to Mr. Odell Beckham. Goes from LSU, drafted in the first round, pick 12, to the New York Giants to play with one Mr. I just threw an interception, Eli Manning. Just got sacked after my interception on the next very play. So, what do we think about Mr. Beckham? I mean, is he, Hakeem Nicks left the Giants. You still have, Ruben Randall there, who is, a guy going into, he's actually pretty high on my board this year as a guy who's going to break through. You still have Victor Cruz. What do we think about his opportunity and his skill set, Jimmer?
Well, I think Odell Beckham is basically drafted on his talent. The dude's a beast. He could very easily slip into that number 2 position on the team as a wide receiver with Ruben Randall aging and just kind of that whole situation. I'm not a big fan of his. I think, again, he was picked based on talent, and they were hoping that they could use him as kind of some sort of modified slot position. He's not necessarily big by any means. Maybe he becomes another Tavon Austin where he has some great game, but that's really at best is all I see for him. I don't think you can really, unless he emerges out of, training camp and preseason as, Eli's new favorite target, I don't think he's draftable by any means. I think he's something to keep an eye on, especially for dynasty leagues, and I think that's something maybe to consider. But outside of that, you could probably pick him up off the waivers later on. And again, we were talking about two of the first 3 picks here that honestly they were picked up by their talent, not necessarily on their potential. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind for right now. So guys, thoughts on that?
Yeah, size-wise, I mean, he's comparable to Cecil Shorts. He's about 5'11". That's kind of small for today's NFL, prototypical wide receiver. But he's a great athlete. He's got great acceleration, good top-end speed. Apparently his hands are big for his size. That's always good. But, like I said, you have Victor Cruz there, Ruben Randall. But outside of that, you've got Gerald Jernigan for crying out loud. Like I said, Hakeem Nicks is gone. So this is a guy who might, in a PPR league, at the end of the season be somewhat relevant. But again, this isn't a guy that's worth drafting. It's just somebody that you would, maybe pick up on waivers for a bye week if you were to really flash. Well, let's move along to a guy that I am most excited about from a wide receiver perspective. Yes, he's a good wide receiver on his own right, but I think it's the fit which makes him very intriguing to me. This is Brandon Cooks, wide receiver from Oregon State. Jimmer, I know you hate those guys, but I also know you watched a lot of him throughout the years playing your team. He's going to the New Orleans Saints. Again, guys, a lot of this stuff is about opportunity and fit. He is going to the Saints with Drew Brees. Jimmy Graham Colston are the two guys there. They lost Darren Sproles. They lost Lance Moore. So what do you think about his skill set and his potential for 2014?
First of all, yeah, I got to watch this guy firsthand on several occasions. Blistering speed. He is just super fast. He's a bit explosive. He's in the right place. He got drafted in the right place, right time. I think Drew Brees is going to capitalize on it. He easily goes into that number 2 position on their wide receiver list. And over there in the Saints, he's very extremely draftable this year. I would consider him mid-rounder. Honestly, I don't see how he could slip much further than that. The guy can catch. He put up just back-breaking numbers here in Pac-12 on the West Coast. He's got a great opportunity all around. And honestly, Dynasty Leagues, this guy's definitely a high rounder for Dynasty Leagues. He's something to kind of keep an eye on. So that's my take on it. Jay, you got any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, really, what competition did he face? I mean, they played Oregon, really?
Best cornerback tandem in the country.
Just kidding, Jimmer. Yeah, I mean, the guy is amazing, and making him even more amazing is Drew Brees throwing the guy. So I think he's going to be a wide receiver too, definitely this year as a rookie, as long as he doesn't fuck up too much and he works hard and learns the playbook.
Yeah, and I think I need to mention here, because last week, if you heard our show, we were actually talking about running backs, but I mentioned Kenny Stills as a sleeper for the Saints this year just because of all the people that I said that they lost, Lance Moore, Sproles, and so forth. But I think this downgrades Kenny Stills a little bit about his potential upside, so I have concerns there. But I think, especially in a PPR, again, Drew Brees throwing in the ball, that's like, going into a Denver Broncos type offense to where he's going to get a lot of looks. So, to me, I still wouldn't draft him in mid-rounds simply because, like I said at the beginning of the show, wide receiver is so deep with guys that produce. You've seen it year after year. That's the only reason I think he's more of a late-round pick. And rookies, by in general, are risky to draft as it is. But I think he's one of the guys. He's, to me, the top wide receiver on the board from a 2014 perspective. And Jim, I just wanted to ask you, because of his size, I mean, he's under 5'10". He lacks that prototypical size. Do you see him as playing out of the slot, especially that now that Sproles is gone and took up a lot of that the last few years?
Yeah, they lined him up a lot of times as in a slot position, so he's not necessarily familiar with it, but I shouldn't say that. He's familiar with it, but that wasn't his natural role. And the position that he needed to play at Oregon State, he was actually just a true wide receiver. I think he will transition to more of a slot Wes Welker type position. So that's more of what I would expect from him in the pros. And because, honestly, just get the ball in the kid's hands and he'll take it from there. Well, however, he can beat you deep on long patterns. So
running a 4-3-3, he can clearly beat people deep. But I think that's fantastic. I think if he becomes that slot position role for the Saints, I think that makes him even better from a draft perspective, especially in PPR. If he can catch those 5 to 7 yard passes and so forth and take it to the house, that's something great for fantasy. So we're going to move on to another guy that we're all pretty high on because A, he's literally a giant, and B, he is probably going to the best spot a wide receiver rookie could be going to, the Carolina Panthers, and that's Kelvin Benjamin. Coming from Florida State, so he's at a big school. We've seen him play good competition in top corners. He went in the first round at pick 28. You knew the Panthers were going to draft a wide receiver because they have no one, and I mean no one. They traded away Steve Smith and Brandon LaFell. They've got Ted Ginn left, for Pete's sake. They've got Cotchery, Jason Avant, Tyquan Underwood, and they've got nobody. We could literally try out and make the team and start in September. So they draft this big, monstrous man. So, Jimmer, what you can tell us about Mr. Benjamin?
All right, well, first of all, last time this guy caught a touchdown was with 19 seconds left in the national championship game. Guy is a stud. He's huge. Literally on the field, he has this presence in this domain where it's just like, hey, anything within 20 yards, this guy's catching. It doesn't matter how big or what size, he's going to go up against the Darrelle Revises of the NFL. He's going to outjump him. He's going to catch him above him. He's Megatron size. However, that does not necessarily mean he is the next Megatron. Quite frankly, he's a little slow. He lacks some agility tests. He had a bunch of problems with routes. He basically all the combine stats and numbers hated this guy. On paper, he looks like he's the next Megatron, but everywhere else, I mean, the numbers and everything else say he's not. So that's something you got to kind of keep an eye on. I don't know how well he's going to fit in there. I know this much, that Cam Newton generally needs to just kind of lob it up to people and throw it in their area because he's not exactly an accurate passer. He's an area passer. And if that's the case, those two could really make a good blend, and he would be something truly blessed to be in that situation. So with that, I mean, honestly, man, I'd put him right there. Late rounder. I think he's a late rounder for sure. So,
ET phone home. So, I think, again, like I said, I think this is the best spot a rookie could have landed. Cam Newton, if you've watched him play as I have the last few years, yeah, you're right, Jim. I think his area passer is right on the money. And a lot of times when I've watched this guy, when Cam misses, he misses high. Well, it's damn near impossible to miss high with Benjamin. The guy's 6'5", he's huge, his wingspan, everything about it. He's slow. I mean, he's slower than probably a lot of tight ends out there. Actually, that's definitely not. But I think so. As far as red zone goes, I mean, this guy could catch 8 to 10 touchdowns this season. I don't know how many yards he's going to get in that offense, but he's walking in essentially as their kind of default wide receiver one. Again, because they have the worst, wide receiver backfield in the history of the NFL in all likelihood. So because of opportunity, I think he's going to be relevant and, again, probably a late-round pick just because of how deep the wide receivers are. All right, so we're going to move on to Marquise Lee, wide receiver going to Jacksonville Jaguars from USC, second-round pick with pick 7. Justin Blackman, they're thinking will not return at all this season because he's smoking a doobie with Josh Gordon as we speak. Some liken him to some liken him to Victor Cruz. Jimmer, do you see any sort of similarities between the two in their skill set?
So here's the deal. Marquise Lee going into the season with pre-injuries, pre-quarterback situation, pre-coach issue. The guy was honestly locked for a top 10 pick, locked for probably a top 5 pick coming into this. He was the Sammy Watkins essentially. So that's something you got to kind of keep in mind is this guy has all the skill sets, all the intangibles, all of the abilities of Sammy Watkins. Now you're looking at where he went, and he basically went for the cheap to Jacksonville. A couple around later. So he's something really special, and I think it really comes down to who's going to throw to him. So, I mean, we're going to talk about that in a second with Blake Bortles, but, I also want to tie in Marquise Lee because I think he's kind of in the same situation as Paul Richardson. Paul Richardson out of Colorado, he's going to the Sea Chickens, the Super Bowl champion Seahawks. God, that hurts saying that. Too soon. Both of them are small. Both of them are very dynamic. And, yes, they both kind of fit that Victor Cruz kind of model where they will just beat you deep. Maybe a Deshaun Jackson type. Either one of these guys can come out and be the next Chance Allen of the rookie class. I think Paul Richardson, though, the only thing that hurts him is in the offense that he's playing in. It's not necessarily pass happy. They still got Marshawn Lynch there, and they still got, the midget still running their offense. God, is that not nice to say about Russell Wilson? So anyways, my point is that both of these are kind of in the same shoes. Both of them know how to run routes. Both of them know how to blow by people. Both of them have the same agility. Both have great hands. Even though they knocked Marquise Lee for being a little bit dropsy on the balls this year, go back to his freshman year. He didn't drop anything. He could throw anything within 20 yards of him, as small as he is, and he'd just run and go get it. Both of those guys, I think he should be able to pull off the waiver at some point. Both of them I see as kind of wide receiver 2, but they could be something special in the years to come. So that's kind of, kind of bundle those two together.
Yeah, I don't think he's draftable. I think it's a good landing spot because Jacksonville essentially has no wide receivers to speak of, but the reality is, Chad Henne or Blake Bortles, the rookie, is going to be throwing him the ball, so he's completely untrustworthy, too risky to ever draft. Again, this is a waiver wire fodder type guy, in my opinion. So let's see. Jim, any other wide? Let's finish out the wide receiver segment just because we're Broncos homers, and talk about Cody Latimer. The Broncos actually went up the draft board, reached to get him. This guy comes from Indiana. We grabbed him in the second round, pick 24. We have a lot of weapons, obviously, already there in the most prolific offense of all time. Unfortunately, it didn't result us in a Super Bowl. But do you think, does he have any relevance at all? I mean, is this a guy, because we all believe that Wes Welker, he's probably as limited in his years in the future as Peyton Manning is. They're going to need someone to fill in the slot role. Maybe that will be with Emmanuel Sanders coming, and that maybe Latimer can fulfill the Eric Decker role, in 2 or 3 years from now. What do you think about his skills and his potential for 2014 and beyond?
Great skill set. Keep an eye on him. Not draftable. Might plug and play him for a week if we have catastrophic injuries in Denver, which I hate saying that. That's just kind of my opinion on that. He honestly is in a little bit worse of a situation than a guy like Davante Adams out of Green Bay. They kind of got depleted a little bit in wide receivers, but they still have so many guys there. And Broncos brought in whatever his name is, Emmanuel Sanders, and so you kind of got to wonder, like, these guys are just there for essentially training practice. Eventually they could be plug-and-play guys. One other situation that we probably should talk about at some point is the Philly situation. Chip Kelly went after there, got 2 new receivers to play with. One's Jordan Matthews, intelligent kid, very intelligent, comes out of Vanderbilt. He could learn that offense very quickly and could be an instant impact player. But he also drafted Josh Huff up there in Philly, and Josh Huff was the guy that he recruited at Oregon, my boys. He actually went and got another 2 more Ducks, I believe, in the draft. So Chip's offense is going to produce, so there's something to kind of keep an eye out there during training camps and going into preseason football. So hopefully your draft is late enough where you can watch a few games and see what each of these teams got. So I think that kind of wraps it up, unless, Jay, you got any other thoughts on wide receivers?
No, I think that wraps up the Oregon Ducks circle jerk.
Thank you.
Well, guys, right before we move on, Jim, again, just for the audience, just to sum things, summarize what we just talked about. As far as 2014 goes for redraft leagues, I think we all collectively, like Brandon Cook's potential the best because he's going to the Saints, finds himself, an opportunity there with Drew Brees. But from a dynasty perspective, Jimmer, which one of these guys, if you had to forecast their careers over the next 5 to 7 years, just strictly based on how good they are as a wide receiver, regardless of their current situation, how would you rank the top couple?
I think Paul Richardson's going to be something special.
Okay.
So, you can't say Kelvin Benjamin's not going to pan out, and you can't say Marquise Lee's not going to pan out, and you can't say Marquise Lee is going to pan out, but I think Paul Richardson's just something special. So.
Okay. All right, so we're going to wrap that up there then on wide receivers and head over to quarterbacks. We're just going to talk about a few of them here and talk about their potential fantasy relevancy for this coming season, if at all. We got to start, in all due respect, to the number 1 quarterback off the board this draft. It was kind of a surprise, frankly. All the quarterbacks and where they were going to go was a surprise, but I think most experts, had Johnny Football going off the board first. However, the Jacksonville Jaguars kind of surprised a lot of people and picked up Jake Bortles with the 3rd overall pick, first quarterback off the board, coming from UCF, respectively. So what do we think about Bortles, his talent level there and the competition that he played and his potential NFL future there for Jacksonville?
I would just like to say one thing real quick. I want to make a public apology to Mr. Johnny Manziel. The reason that you dropped so far, sir, was because your name was picked for me in the fantasy league's draft order thing that we did, and that is why you dropped so far. So go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, we'll get into Manziel. Bortles. Okay, first of all, Bortles, he's a real good talent. He really came on strong this year. Before this, he was virtually unknown. No one knew who he was. No one knew where he came from. But he's a big guy. He's kind of a Ben Roethlisberger type, honestly, and I think that's his true upside. I think Jaguars lucked out and they did not draft another Blaine Gabbert. So God bless them. They didn't screw this one up. He's big, accurate pocket passer, and I think that's something that they're really going to need to kind of help develop. He's not going to start. They already came out and said it. He's something where I would keep an eye on him as the season progresses. I think my quote of this guy is basically he's not fantasy draftable unless you're in a 12-man league with 2 quarterbacks in your lineup and you need a third. So basically there's roughly 35 quarterbacks that are better than this guy. But other than that, I think he's really good.
Yeah, I don't see him starting right out of the gate. They've definitely, the ownership there has kind of come down and pretty much said that. I mean, he'll compete in training camp and so forth, but I think the journeyman, Chad Henne, will start there. I think Bortles might get some starts towards the end of the year. He might end up being the starter in the latter part of the season. But the problem with this guy, is he doesn't have any wide receivers. I mean, like we mentioned, Justin Blackmon's is probably gone in all likelihood. He's pretty much just has Cecil Shorts and their new rookie and Lee, so he doesn't have a whole lot of options to throw to. Definitely do not think he's fantasy relevant at all in redraft leagues. It'll just be interesting to see just kind of how that drama unfolds. So let's move on to one Mr. Johnny Football coming from Texas A&M to the Browns. The Browns, people thought they might draft him with the 4th overall pick, but they traded down. But he ended up being there at pick 22 for the Browns' 2nd pick in the 1st round because of their awesome trade to get rid of Trent I Suck Richardson. And they scooped him up, and I think they wanted him all along. They ended up getting their guy. Unfortunately, you saw Johnny crying in his beer. That Josh Gordon is likely not going to play. But actually, a little nugget here that I thought was interesting. Johnny, back at his hometown, one of his favorite bars there in A&M, right around the college there, he was there prior to the draft. He left his credit card number with the bartender, the owner, or whatnot. And the moment after he was drafted, the bartender bought a round of beers and shots for every single person in the bar on behalf of Johnny Football. So I thought that was cool. That goes with his bad boy mantra. So we'll see how that pans out for him in the NFL season. But what do we think about Johnny? Again, he's a running quarterback. We like those in fantasy football. But he did probably, in all likelihood, lose Josh Gordon. And he also got to compete with Brian Hoyer, who actually looked pretty good before he got hurt last season.
All right, so Jadeveon Clowney's the freak show. Johnny Manziel is the sideshow. Quite frankly, the dude's just a walking circus wherever he goes. The Browns GM and management basically came out and said, you are a backup quarterback. You need to start acting as such. That was basically Poppy saying, come sit down on my knee here, Sonny. We're done with you. So that's kind of the way you need to look at Johnny Manziel. He is a freak of nature when he moves outside of the pocket, though, and I will say that much. He had something like 2,600 yards in the last 26 games from scrambling. That's something you got to kind of keep an eye on. I don't know how well that'll translate into the NFL, and I don't know if that'll translate at all. But that's just something that I kind of took an interest on. He, again, is kind of like Bortles, where he's kind of a wait and see. I think he's got more talent than a Tim Tebow, but I think that's maybe what they got in him. I don't know how long he'll last. I think the city will rally behind him because they're the Browns. They just got a movie made after them, Draft Day. And unfortunately, I think they ended up with the wrong quarterback. So,
well, let's talk about that pick where he fell. I mean, he fell to pick 22, and as it was pointed out all over the internet after they picked him, that the past 3 quarterbacks that they've picked, including Manziel, were at pick 22 of the first round. And how did they end up? Not so great. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe it's a curse or something like that. Again,
Tim Couch is a great man.
We love
Tim
him.
Couch wasn't one of them, actually. It was Brady Quinn and Hoyer, I believe. Anyway, yeah, Johnny Manziel, his scrambling, you're right, Jim. The guy can run like the wind. The question is, and I agree with you, will that translate to the NFL? I think this guy starts running around like that. He's going to get hit so hard that he may think twice about leaving that pocket again. But if he ends up getting the starting job there, I'd definitely keep an eye on him. Somebody that might produce some points for you.
Yeah, let's not forget, we mentioned Tim Tebow. Obviously, the guy could not throw to save his life. However, he was averaging 20 to 25 fantasy points when he was a starter in Denver. So he is relevant. I'm not so sure Johnny's gonna start out the season as the starter, but there's going to be so much pressure on management and the coaching staff and ownership and so forth if he doesn't start. And if they're losing or losing some games and Hoyer's in there or so not. So definitely keep an eye out on him. We're going to move now to Teddy Bridgewater out of Louisville. He was drafted in the first round as well. The Vikings moved up and traded picks and got him as the last pick of the first round. I actually think Teddy Bridgewater has the highest chance of starting the season as the starter than any of these other rookies. Just because of the situation he finds himself in Minnesota with Matt Castle and Christian Ponder and his smoking hot wife. Because I think he's probably going to end up winning that job. He was also kind of known as the most probably NFL-ready quarterback out of the draft class from everything I read. Doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but he was the most NFL-ready a coach, according to all the NFL draft experts. So, Jimmer, what do we think about Teddy and his chances in Minnesota, pairing him up with your man crush, Cordell Patterson and Adrian Peterson?
Unfortunately, I personally don't think he's going to get a chance to throw to him outside of practice. That's just my take on it. I think he's going to get groomed by Matt Castle. I think he has the chance to get in there pending injuries. But quite frankly, I just don't quite see him as a starter yet. He definitely has a lot of the intangibles. A lot of stuff the Combine kind of brought up is that he's missing a few key elements in his game. He couldn't quite make all the passes. He couldn't quite do everything you thought he was capable of or what you saw in game film. In game film, you saw just a ton more than I expected, and that's kind of what his value is there, is what you actually see him do in games. So with that, I just don't think he's draftable in fantasy leagues.
Okay. So, Jim, or any other quarterbacks you want to mention? Derek Carr was, drafted to the Raiders. We got Logan Thomas to the Cardinals. One Mr. A.J. McCarron went off to Cincinnati in the 5th round. He dropped considerably. And Taj Boyd to the Jets. Any of those guys you want to talk about?
Yeah, let me just each one of those real quick talk about. Derek Carr might be the dumbest human being ever to be drafted. I'm going to go ahead and say that, and he's a perfect fit for the dumbest franchise in the NFL history. That's the Oakland Raiders. Logan Thomas, for some reason the GM went and visited him twice. I have no idea why, and that doesn't quite fully make sense to me. So maybe eventually he could be Carson Palmer's heir, which sounds weird to say, but that's a possibility. A.J. McCarron, he got drafted. Can we all just collectively laugh for a second? Okay, let's do it again. He's just whatever. He's so overrated. It's scary. But let's Taj Boyd. He was probably one of my favorites going into this, and unfortunately, he went to the Jets. Highly doubt he's going to play there. Unfortunately, he's going to be at best a Kellen Clemens 6 years from now, where he goes, wins a few games for someone, gets another $5 million check, goes to the next team for a year, wins a few games for them, goes to the next team, gets another couple million. He's going to be one of those guys, and that's unfortunate because he was a top 5 quarterback going into the season and left the season being drafted in the 6th round, and that hurts. So sorry, Taj.
All right, well, that wraps up the quarterback conversation. We're going to move to our last potential fantasy relevant group, and that is the tight ends. We're just going to talk about a couple of them. So the first tight end off the board, I think it was a little bit of a surprise coming that early, was Eric Ebron coming from North Carolina. He proposed to his future wife, current fiance, there in New York City the day before the draft, or maybe the day of the draft. It's pretty awesome. Just find that on YouTube. But he goes to the Detroit Lions. So, Jimmer, why don't you talk about Ebron and his potential, and then we'll have Jay kind of discuss what he thinks about his Detroit Lions picking Ebron with their first overall pick.
the guy doesn't make sense. He's basically a wide receiver with the tight end's body. I mean, he's fast, he's big, he's got hands. He played at North Carolina, which makes no sense. I mean, was he trying to play basketball? I never fully got that one. He is one of those guys where, you know, he could very well be the next Jimmy Graham, and I think that's truly, he's one of those hybrid guys where, hey, pay me as a wide receiver because I'm not a tight end. So that's kind of what he is. I would keep an eye on him. I don't think he's draftable. I don't think he's going to break the top 10 in tight ends this year. Dynasty leagues, definitely keep an eye on this guy. I mean, is he a first-round draft pick? No, but he's definitely worth keeping an eye on. I think actually the Lions kind of reached a little bit for him. I was kind of surprised because I thought he'd be available in the 20 selection, even maybe into the second round. So, Jay, tell me, what the hell were your beloved Lions thinking?
Well, they're thinking he was the second best wide receiver in the draft, is what they were thinking. And that's exactly what they're going to use him for. I mean, we know Jimmy Graham lines up as a true tight end only 30% of the time. Tim Twentyman, who's the beat reporter for the Lions, did report that they intend to use Ebron in a Jimmy Graham role. So that means he'll be lining up as a wide receiver. This guy, believe it or not, is going to be a top 10 tight end this year.
You heard it here first, folks.
They do. Yeah, they do. Look, they don't have any other tight ends that can catch the ball there. They got Joseph Foria, who is a good end zone target because he's so big. That's it. He can stand there and go, throw me ball. But he doesn't have much to him besides that. And we all know Pettigrew's hands are made out of stone or wood,
bricks or rock or concrete.
Something that balls bounce off of every time they come in his vicinity. So neither of those guys are even going to be an issue. This guy's going to get every tight end target this year minus a couple red zone targets. So yes, in a passing offense like this, he's going to be a hell of a freaking guy to have.
So my two thoughts on Ebron, I think that's our resident Lions fan optimistic view, as all Lions fans have in the preseason.
Fuck you.
I don't see him as a top 10 at all. But he is dynamic. A couple little tidbits here. Him and his fellow teammate Giovanni Bernard had a little bet apparently of who would run the faster 40 at the combine, and Eric beat Giovanni Bernard's 40 in the combine as a tight end, as a man who is like 3 times the size of Giovanni Bernard. So that was pretty interesting to me. I think the Lions regret signing Pettigrew this offseason. I don't think they knew about their plan, obviously, of drafting this guy as their first overall pick. So, you know, I see him as probably his history does not bear out that tight ends do well in their rookie season. It's very few and far between. He is going to a good offense for it, but to think that he's a top 10, I think, is optimistic. I see him as, you know, outside the top 15 probably in his rookie season, but I think there's good things for him to come moving forward. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the second and last potentially relevant tight end, even worth talking about in fantasy circles, and that's Austin Seferian-Jenkins, if I even said that right, tight end from Washington. They drafted him in the second round with the 6th overall pick. So a guy that you draft that high, that you reach for, typically gets playing time. Going over to the Buccaneers, they also drafted, of course, wide receiver there, and they have Vincent Jackson and so on. So, Jimmer, I didn't see this guy play that much at all in college. You know, what did you see from him, and do you think he has any relevancy or any dynasty relevancy moving forward?
Yeah, guy's a monster. And I'm going to keep referring to him as a head case because he doesn't quite make sense. You'll see one game he'll blow up a team for 150 yards and 2 TDs, and the next week he'll show up with 30 yards and 4 drop catches. Like, he just doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't. He's up and down. He definitely is probably the only guy in this draft that I would say is a Gronk, and the reason why I say he's a Gronk is because he's just not going to probably play a bunch, and he's most likely to get hurt. And I think that's kind of the funny part about him, in kind of a crude and mean way. But a lot of motivation issues, I think, in the situation he's at with the Bucs. Man, I don't know. He's a wild card at best. I think there's a couple other guys to keep an eye on. Colt Laera, There's a big guy out of Big 12. I'm trying to remember his name, from Wisconsin. He might be someone to kind of keep an eye on, and Michigan State has a guy. So, I mean, there's a couple other tight ends, but honestly, none of them are fantasy relevant. Stick with the guys that we know. I'm probably going to try and keep Tony Gonzalez again this year. I'm sure he's going to make a comeback, so pretty thin tight end draft.
Well, so Jimmer, this guy, I mean, he ran a 4.56 40 at the combine. He's definitely got some speed. The only competition he has there is, Brandon Myers, who we all know, isn't worth the tight end paper he's written on. But Tim Wright did flash at times last season. I mean, was Jenkins? Is he does he have skills from a blocking tight end perspective, or is he strictly kind of a wide receiver tight end?
I've seen him mail it in a few times blocking. So I mean, if he gets the right coach and he gets the right guy to kind of put his head on straight and motivate him properly, he could be very, very good. But he's just had a lot of those issues. And Steve Sarkisian, who's his coach this last couple of years up at Washington, he's a good coach. And quite frankly, they couldn't figure him out to save his life. And then every once in a while, he'd just show these brilliant games, and you're like, man, he did everything. He blocked, he caught. I don't know. He's a little streaky, and it doesn't quite make sense to me. There's something else going on there. So I did not see the full scouting report on him. I do know that he is talented.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap it up for our special NFL Draft recap show. On our next show, we'll be breaking down and tiering the top 25 fantasy wide receivers for 2014 and comparing our rankings to the current ADP of Fantasy Football Calculator. So go ahead and tune in to see how we're going to match up there. Again, as a reminder, we are live every 2 weeks in the off season. We'll be going to every week once we get closer to the start of the NFL season. So tune in this coming Friday, 2 weeks from now, May 23rd, for our next live hangout. In the meantime, download this show on iTunes, find us on Stitcher Radio, and check out our previous shows on the Red Zone Warriors Fantasy Football Show YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and tweet us all your fantasy football questions at Red Zone Warriors. So for the Cushman and the Jimmer, I am Rob Smith, and remember, if you are taking a fantasy football off season, then you are already losing. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.